Here we are at it again. Are we on? Yes, we are. Singing the praises of the downfall of the gaming industry. You know, it's sad we're at this point, but I think everyone understood that, yeah, this was sort of the trajectory. Many games companies have been going down ever since it got popular. And when things get popular, said things, okay, will just lose the soul it had to begin with because people come into the space not really caring about the thing itself. You know, in some cases it's entertainment, so like movies, songs, video games, TV shows, like has all went through this downward trajectory of the thing that used to be well, I guess at one point it was looked down upon until it got popular. And now that the thing's popular, it's worldwide, it's global. Now it's being used as a means to launder money. And people throw around money laundering a lot. And it's like, what do you mean launder money? Well, to try to pump money artificially into something with the intent of, I don't know, just paying someone, being corrupt, paying, people that you're connected with. This is why, and what I've heard was the lead writer of Dragon Age Veilguard that got, well, either fired or left. Now she is part of Halo Studios, over Halo. And you see things like these and you're like, yeah, that seems just a little bit corrupt because they go from one IP that has failed, and egregiously so, and they go to another IP that will inevitably fail, or at least in the case of Halo Studios, right? Halo has been going down. I'm gonna turn some air on. It is actually burning the fuck up. Spring is a coming, so if you hear that in the background, I don't know. Get the fuck over it. But yeah, they fly these golden parachutes to other projects and to other roles to do with entertainment. And I mean, to an extent, it makes sense. Like, it's this kind of the same way with CEOs, right? Because there's a small pool of CEOs to pull from for companies. So if you will need a CEO, well, you only really have, I don't know, you only need one CEO per company. So, and there's not going to be a lot of them that needs the job in the job market. That's why you have that Riccatello guy being passed around like a fucking fleshlight through all these studios and all these places because, I mean, what other CEO? And again, he's doing his job. Like, he's making the company money. That's why they hire him. The problem is it's at the cost of the project or the entertainment of the consumer. So the company's making money, but the consumer's suffering because of it. So Ubisoft did the bare minimum, Naughty Dog did nothing. Not surprised.
Right, this is a properly serious and impactful video. The way that our games are being made is changing. The collective insanity of paying hundreds of maxed out salaries in the most expensive development cluster on Earth, California, is winding down. Things are changing. One upshot of that is, say, Space Marine 2, costing half of what Doom Eternal did, even though it was made on a more inflated dollar, a similarly long time scale, and in fact was made by a significantly larger team.
Yeah, I said this before, right? There is an incentive to inflate the cost of making a project, for tax write-offs, to raise the ceiling, to justify having the consumer pay more for it. I mean, there is that incentive to raise the price of gamings, and it's again yet another thing done artificially. You know, there's no reason for it. Like, you have games that have been made, like God, so long ago with a tenth of the budget that games are made nowadays, and they end up being good games, good products, like well received products. But then you have over bloated multi-million dollar games, like hundreds of millions of dollars pushed into a game that flops, like that Avowed series. Like, they had so many things lined up. They had podcast, art, cosplay, you know, only for the game itself, the very thing that's predicated on that IP, which is the game, flopping so goddamn hard that I think that studio went under, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, I think they put the kibosh on that real fucking fast. And also, what I heard with Nintendo is they're axing all of the DEI things. Like, they're from what the person told me was someone literally just walked in that place and was like, okay, this DEI shit, the Trump administration doesn't care for. Cut that shit out right now. And I'm like, and everyone's like, yeah, finally, you're just now realizing this. Like, I understand it was, you know, an inflated scam that it's something they try to impose on the rest of the market that, no, you need this, otherwise you don't get grants, you get blacklisted, you know, hey, you may even get audited or investigated for, I don't know, sexism in the workplace. Yeah, something like that. And a lot of people are like, well, it is in our interest to do this, even if we don't care. And there's also a lot of money locked behind it.
That was all because of outsourcing. And done well, outsourcing can be fantastic. It can actually be a ladder up into the industry, but it cuts both ways. Do you remember the people nets that were placed around Foxconn facilities? You know, outside windows? Well, today, unfortunately, is going to be a story along those lines. It's an important one, and it does impact the games that are made and that you play. The victims of today's story worked on Assassin's Creed Shadows, Age of Empires 4, and The Last of Us Part 1 Remastered. So this is not a story about some niche game that nobody's ever heard about that's a total aberration. This is about AAAs that we have purchased and played. I mean, I've played AoE 4. In 2021, People Make Games' investigation showed us how publishers exploit workers having weaker rights in, say, regions like many places in Southeast Asia for cheaper development costs. But they then followed up their story, and their 2024 follow-up reveals something that is far more disturbing. This is Brandeville Studio, a self-described, per their Instagram bio, leading AAA art and animation studio located in Jakarta, which is the capital of Indonesia. And they worked on Assassin's Creed, Last of Us Part 1 Remaster, and such huge, high-budget projects. But behind those polished assets...
Well, I mean, those are prequels and sequels and I guess one remake. But yeah, the IPs themselves are huge, right? Despite being prequels and sequels and remakes. And, I mean, I think a couple of them did make quite a bit of money from them. Yeah.
Nations lay a fairly horrifying daily reality for the people who worked there. The details in the People Make Games video are shocking. They are physical, they are mental, there is wage theft, and they are specific. It is not generic stuff, it is horrible. We can barely begin to breach the surface, and it would be wrong to just rehash their work. You should check their work out for that story. But what we can do here is we can expand on how and why their Western partners treat them like that. And I want you to think about that. A studio contributing to some of gaming's largest titles was allegedly abusing its workers, and we barely heard a peep. That's
I'm not surprised. Look, people forget, like, Nike was utilizing effectively slave labor in Asia to make their shoes. And I think human rights violations have this cool down. Like, after a while, people either don't care, they stop caring, and then you have the whole Nike thing where you have Kendrick Lamar taking the knee. And to me, it's like, ah, goody, another publicity stunt. Cool, amazing. But everyone acted like they cared, acted like it was something huge. But to me, it's like, publicity stunt. It's one of those.
because this ecosystem, studios like that, it's all invisible by design. That's the very thing that lets them get away with such levels of rampant cost cutting, because it's far away and nobody really knows the name. Outside of the Gamers coverage last September, Western media largely ignored it, and even in Indonesia, it only made waves after the company went under and things properly came out. All credit and notoriety goes to the intellectual property, to the publisher and the lead studio, like Naughty Dog. It's just like how if you go and watch, for some reason, a big studio popcorn movie, and at the end you look at the credits, and you just see the countless Indian VFX studios rocket past with so many employees. And you're no doubt aware, because I think everyone is by now, how screwed the VFX industry is in the West and how it's almost certainly worse over there. And the rough...
Yeah, they're effectively squeezed. It's like you'll never hear who worked in the VFX department. Like you'll hear the IP people will suck Neil Druckmann's cock. You know, people will defend the voice actors because they have the correct opinions, but then you have the VFX teams, you know, the people on the ground, you know, in the basement doing the job, and they're almost universally exploited. And I'm not surprised it's even worse in countries that, you know, don't have the same type of employment laws that we do here in the West. I mean, that's just something that isn't really... It's you hear it and you're like, yeah, it makes sense. I mean, it shouldn't be that way, but that's the times we live, unfortunately. You know, we live in an age where, you know, exploitation... It's like, if exploitation's not happening, well, then there's a problem. Like, you know, the company will completely flip its shit. It's like, oh no, we must. It's something that has to happen. And unfortunately, it's to the detriment of the employees. You know, unfortunately, that has to happen. And I wish it didn't. And here in the West, you know, people hold the consumer accountable for not buying a product from a company, which is the greatest load of horse shit I've ever heard in my entire life. Like, at the end of the day, the consumer just wants a good product. They don't care who makes it, you know, for better or for worse. They don't care who made it. You know, the consumer just wants a good fucking product. And again, if you don't like the slave labor effectively being utilized to do that halfway across the world, well then, America should compete, right? America should make a better product ethically. And that's how you counter this. You don't counter it by attacking the consumer, because the consumer can tell you to go fuck off. And you have no, you know, power over the consumer. So your only option is to fuck off.
Reality is it is absolutely possible to profit from exploitation, but there is always some form of cost. I mean, there's the obvious human one, but also, why do all your movies look like slop? That's the sort of thing I know we've all felt. And you may still say, hang on a second, Foxconn, installers have said PeopleNets, make iPhones, and iPhones are really high quality. They're basically great. Yeah, that's because every iPhone is the same. It's literally a factory line. Games in VFX are not factory lines. They are bespoke art. Farming out art, like it's just an iPhone assembly line, is bad.
Yeah, and brother, I've been saying this, like, I've been speaking the tune of treating art like it's a mass producible product is a bad thing. You know, it's bad. You know, it does not work that way. And I am so glad someone that has a bigger channel said this. I mean, you can take full responsibility for this, for saying that. But yeah, I mean, art by just the very nature, you know, some people can like it, some people may not like it. At the end of the day, it's up to you to make the better product and make art that, again, some people may like, some people may not. You know, it's not on the consumer. You know, you can't demand the consumer pay for it. You can't demand, oh, you can't have a product that's quote unquote for everyone. Because, again, the running idea is if it's for everyone, well, it's probably for no one. Because a product for everyone just does not exist. You know, art for everybody just does not exist anywhere in any form. I mean, it's for anyone in the case that anyone can enjoy it. It's just not everyone. You can't demand everyone likes it.
Shockingly, and worse, it kills the ecosystem, and that.
Yeah, this is that browser that doesn't have the ad block, but
That is not just a piece of fluff, because 2020's events make the cost of this clear. This is Certain Affinity, and they are a Texas-based support studio, and the chances are that you have played their work, be that Left 4 Dead, Doom 2016, Prey, Hogwarts Legacy, Call of Duty, and Halo. So much Halo. They're talented, they have a proven track record, and yes, they are actually related to a horror story from Indonesia, because sadly, this is a story where short-term corporate greed pits workers' interests against themselves and against their futures. What happened to Certain Affinity is rough because their bread and butter work, the support work that's now being farmed out, dried up. Put simply, fewer and fewer big companies had gigs for them, and 2024 marked a pretty horrible first in their 17-year history. Layoffs, 10% of their headcount gone, and in a way it would get worse because shortly after that they sold to an Irish support studio megacorp called Keywinds. And even when you read the founder's very polished press release comments, it's kind of clear what's up because he says, and bear in mind, this isn't a polished press release. At this most difficult time in the market, we're thrilled to be able to provide stability and a supportive home for our team. Yes, I mean, basically that makes it clear this was a matter of survival. Certain Affinity survived, but many other support studios did not survive, be that Paladin, Puny Human, Counterplay, and others, even throughout 2024
and this is the thing with delegation, right? It's like you delegate so far that you're in this situation where one little part's coming from one place with no oversight, another little part of something is coming from another place with no oversight, and at the end of it all, you're just left with a product that, again, it's like, who is it for? I mean, you don't have situations like Blizzard where the Blizzard employee, no, at the time, like, I don't know, early 2000s, where the coders and the writers and the storytellers, like, they all had a say in the product. You have parts coming from different places on the planet with different cultures, different ideologies, and they're all coming together to make a product. And that's fine, on paper, but again, we're talking art. We're not talking like car parts. So I don't think that that's applicable. Like, you can't just mass produce art that way and then demand people just buy it. Like, it doesn't work that way.
It's probably going to get worse. There is an accelerating wave of Western support studio closures and consolidation, with the latter, consolidation, almost certainly leading to job losses, even if it is just removing duplication. And you may say, but that removal of duplication is fantastic. It makes the market more efficient. It does in an immediate sense. But less independence and more consolidation means less competition. When there's less competition, that is bad for everybody, including you. Bad actors.
Yeah, less competition. Like, competition means the consumer wins because there is that incentive for companies to compete. If they're not competing, they have no incentive to innovate. So you, the consumer, just gets a worse product. Like, you see this with the PlayStation. Since Xbox decided it just wasn't going to compete in that space anymore. And it justifies them selling a $700 fucking Xbox. No, overpriced paperweight. You know, that's what happens when companies don't compete. You just add a baseline, get a worse product overall.
Enter your favorite big publisher here. Get away with worse when there is not robust competition. That means they treat you worse and they treat their workers worse. And to properly understand this, there's a foundational assumption that we need to work into our mental model of the industry. You, I, and developers think that a game studio exists to make games. That's only true on one level, because far too often, it's not the developers that run the studios. It's not the developers who control the coin purse, and what the studios are, in reality, is a financial instrument. Rather than constant emotional reaction to headlines, let's understand the systems. Let's understand how this is actually working. We've all seen the trend that everybody loses, bar the executives, who very rarely bear responsibility for their decisions. Now, the fundamental...
Yeah, in most cases, they, again, fly that golden parachute to another IP that will inevitably end up flopping. And then they fly to another, IP or company that it ends up flopping. And this is why people think it's laundering. It's ideological nepotism that only exists to help the people within the ideology. But everyone else gets just a worse off product.
Fundamental thing is the gaming workforce is global. So imagine that you work on the corporate end of a game studio or publisher. You are less concerned about the actual games. You're actually also less concerned about the strategic stuff. No, your KPIs, OKRs, and perhaps even your personal bonuses, if, say, you're in the financial side of things, are going to be based on the likes of your cost savings, your financial efficiency. Because to you, games are generic widgets, and your job is to optimize the line items of those widgets. Now, remember this guy, Armin Zazra. I'm not saying he's a bad guy, but what happened is Activision rammed him into Blizzard Entertainment as Chief Financial Officer. Looking at his history, he's very much the Ivy League type of guy. He came from Procter & Gamble, who, by the way, are not a video games company. They make soap and so on, which means that he really was well prepared for his job at Blizzard. And in Jason Schreier's book, Investigating Blizzard, sources spoke of how he did not understand games. One example was literally just wanting to open another studio as if it was as easy as just opening another soap factory. And it's in this context that we finally loop back round to the situation in Indonesia that people make games talk about. Because in this context, with the sorts of incentives that those people will have in these organizations, if Brandeville can output similar quality assets for less money and act as a black box that you don't need to think about, saving you money versus, say, hiring certain affinity with their Texas and Toronto-based teams that are backed by vast years of experience, well, that's great. The thing that you need is the assets, and you need them for less money. You've achieved that. Good job. Just that, in this case, your job done like that for short-term reasons. Maybe it's your OKRs, your objectives and key results. Maybe it's your bonus. Well, the problem is those short-term things are killing the industry. I'm sure you've seen it around.
Yeah, it's creating a standard that is anti-consumer. Just no matter where you look at it, the consumer loses, and the consumer wouldn't stand for that. Like the consumer absolutely should. Under no circumstances should the consumer stand for that, and it's something that most people should understand that's happening. I'm not the type of person that demands everyone else fights my battle, but it's one of those things where people are doing this subconsciously. People are subconsciously seeing a worse product and then they're moving away. They're moving to either China or other types of Asian entertainment, leaving Western entertainment in the dust. And I mean, they have no solution. Like, there's no solution to this. Like, they could make a better product, and they definitely should, but they're not doing that for some reason. Like, for some reason, it's like they're choosing to treat you, the consumer, like you're the bad guy for not buying their product. And yeah, no one in the right mind, like no one with a fully functioning frontal cortex will accept that. People be like, "What the fuck are you talking about? Get the fuck out of my face with this stupid shit." Anyone with any level of self-respect absolutely wouldn't accept that.
It's the idea of being a dumb optimizer. If you over-optimize today, you can end up killing tomorrow. If you outsource too much work, your studio will lose its creative identity. Your artists who would be leading art and doing a lot of art themselves will then turn into outsourcing managers, which is probably not what they're passionate about, and we recently saw this at Riot Games as one example. Your production more and more begins to resemble a factory line. The cheap sugar rush of low-cost East Asian labor enables all of the hell conditions like what people make games exposed. But the thing is, that sugar rush tastes good. It does save you real money. You do get real assets at the end of the day.
Yeah, because you're at this position. Companies are at this odd position where they need infinite growth at all possible. Like, they need just to show to the shareholders that, yeah, we're still growing. We still got it. But you reach this, like, situation where you just cannot obtain that level of growth, efficiently anymore, unless you cut back on other things, and people will see the cutback. Like, the problem with, say, Ubisoft is that they're horribly stretched in like so many ways and places that, and you see this in the quality. Like, we're not even talking the content of the product. We're just talking just the pure quality of it. Like, the quality of the product suffers at the end of all this. And when that happens, well, people see it and people turn away.
And work that used to go to, say, certain affinity dries up. Waves of studios therefore end up downsizing, dying out, consolidation happens, and with that, the institutional knowledge of large-scale game development in our industry dies out. We're left with a Western games industry that is more consolidated and therefore more fragile and with less competition. And it's that consolidation of power, IP, projects and finances that gives all the power to the people who will be shopping their projects around to the various outsourcing studios in a race to the bottom, not unlike what we see in the VFX industry. And to be clear, it is absolutely the case that there are outsourcing studios out there providing real good jobs where it is a good situation and great games are made and supported.
Yeah, Warframe was one of those companies. They're one of those companies that had to outsource a lot of its production, but it did that and ended up with a damn good product at the end of it all. And this was, they had to outsource some of their jobs, some of their jobs to other studios to get the product done. And when they did it, yeah, it ended up like Warframe is like this phenomenon. Like pe- people will people will be singing the praises of Warframe forever. And that's because, believe it or not, if you actually care for the product, you get a good product.
It's fantastic. But as in this example, there are outsourcing places located in countries with lax labor laws that end up being human meat grinders. That's rather obviously bad. It burns talent, it depresses those game sectors. And what happens is that hucksters who are looking for a quick buck, regardless of the human costs, the Frank Reynolds of the games industry, they are selected for in this ecosystem. And that means there will be more and more of them. Who wins? The person who wants to pay more for healthy outsourcing and good creative decisions to make the best product, or the people who control the purse strings and is very happy to get into bed with a group like Brandeville, a black box, outputting assets, no questions asked, but it's suspiciously cheap, all so that they can support underinvestment in their core studio and furthering the deep brain drain causing atrophy that we see everywhere in the industry. And that does matter for you, even if all you care about is self-interest and you getting good games. Now, Ubisoft have responded.
Yeah, at the end of the day, if you want a better product, you should be against things like these. You should be like, yeah, that's pretty shitty. Because, again, maybe you don't really know much about the whole ins and out of, video game marketing and all that. You know that you're getting a bad product when you see it. And now so many others are seeing this, and now people are talking about it. Because at first, you weren't allowed to talk about it because the people were of a certain ideology where you just weren't allowed to criticize what was happening. But you seen what was happening with your own eyes. Like you seen bad products, that treated you like you were dumb and you were an idiot and you needed them to explain ad nauseum, certain concepts to you like you're a fucking idiot. Like you see this happening, but you weren't allowed to say anything. You weren't allowed to talk about it. You just they wanted you to shut the fuck up and just consume product and give them money. And enough people are like, no, I don't think I will. I'm gonna take my money somewhere else. Enough people said that to now it's causing ripples down the video game industry. And now developers are speaking up about this. The consumers are speaking up about this. Whole channels are propping up because of this. And they can't hide it anymore. At the end of the day, it can't be hidden. You can't just snuff out the discussion. And no matter how many times YouTube or no matter how many times other companies try to just smother the conversation, it will eventually just come out, and people will come out and have things to say about it. And when that happens, hey, you'll have these situations where studios flop, fail, fall, and at the end of the day, people are happy that this is happening. People are glad that bad companies, terrible companies, piss poor companies are getting their comeuppance. Because it'll equal a good, better product down the line. Yeah, it'll equal a better product.
This story, so let's bring this goddamn thing home. If these sorts of working conditions happened in an internal Ubisoft studio, there would be a media firestorm. Rightly so. But as it is, this was underreported on because it's a company far, far away with no name recognition, and people don't really associate them with the games they were a part of. You don't think of Brandeville and think, oh, of course, the people who helped in The Last of Us Part 1 Remastered. If you're a journalist in the current media ecosystem, good luck getting SEO-derived clicks from that story, which is why it doesn't end up getting covered as much as it should. And
even if they don't know, again, a lot of these journalists are also in bed with the companies that are doing this level of exploitation. So it's in your interest to shut the fuck up about it. It's journalism that we've all talked about. We all know is happening. I mean, you might not be able to really do anything about it, but we can see it happening. We can see, when we're being manipulated or, being told something that isn't true. And I think people tend to act on that. And by act on it, I mean not give you their fucking money.
When it finally broke, Ubisoft only issued one statement to Eurogamer. In their statement, they said, "We are deeply disturbed by the recent reports surrounding Brandeville Studios. We strongly condemn all forms of abuse, and our thoughts are with the affected employees." Those are nice words. It is also, quite literally, the most minimum action they could take. But it is an action. There was not a peep from Microsoft or Naughty Dog. Even though they both worked with that studio, they did not acknowledge the story. Ubisoft did the bare minimum, but at least they did something. They acknowledged that a bad thing happened at that place that they outsourced work to. Naughty Dog and Microsoft are counting on you not noticing their association, and they likely have strategized that if they respond, well, then there's a story about them responding, and that would transmute this from a story that nobody would recognize into a story that just about everybody would recognize. So
yeah, and that's smart. It's smart to shut the hell up when things like this happen as a company. You don't want your brand to be tarnished. Even if everyone knows what's happening, if you give lip service to it, you only fuel the fire. I mean, again, me explaining the phenomenon isn't me defending it. I mean, it is shitty, it is dumb, and it is, against consumer interest. But, I mean, I can understand the mindset behind shutting the hell up about these things.
So obviously, they won't do it, and they'll just hope it passes them by. It is counting on you not noticing in the same way that they count on you just eating up whatever you are served, and us not drawing the connection between decreased game quality, decreased innovation, and such practices as this one. But this video shows that we actually should care, that this is important. And yet, it is ethically important, I think, absolutely. But even if it is only from your own pure self-interest, if all that you want is good video games, then the loss of talent, the short-termism, and the consolidation are all a problem eroding the foundations of this industry. Now, of course, outsourcing can be done well, and wage arbitrage is actually a part of how some developing economies and their game sectors can catch up. Done right, this can be a win-win. Done blindly to save a quick buck and instituted by people who don't actually care about what their studios produce, the CFO types, or perhaps to get away with absurd timelines that nobody should accept, as is seen in the VFX industry, which leads to, well, modern movies often looking like modern movies, even though they're on humongous brands with hundreds of millions of dollars, looking like slop. Do you want the creative flourishes in a game that are born of the experience that makes a moment within a game special, makes it feel like it's a piece of art made by a human? Do you want that to be sanded down and painted over by a generic torrent of black box labor, all as core studios are underinvested in because everything just turns into cost optimization? Because if you want that, then great, let's have more of this. But I have a suspicion you've got taste and also don't like this, that you...
Yeah, and again, look at like tiny anime studios, some just bumfuck nowhere studios like Game Science that made Black Myth Wukong. Like, they clearly had a creative vision behind the game, and they clearly seek to enact that before anything else, and because of it, I think that's a good game. And it's a good game because, again, I think Black Myth Wukong knows the type of game that it was meant to be, and it knows what it wasn't meant to be, And I seen the uh, that the IGN playing Assassin's Creed Shadow comes out. And I have to give that a look. But again, my initial idea of Assassin's Creed Shadow is it's going to have a bunch of nonsense that you don't care about in the game that doesn't add to the game. If anything, it's just wasted assets and wasted things shoved into the game. Just because, they think this is what the gamers want, this is what the consumer wants, but it's really not. That's my whole synopsis of that situation without even watching it, without even consuming the game. I believe that's what Assassin's Creed Shadow is going to be. And we'll see if that's what ends up happening in the future when I actually look at that.
Don't like craft turning into a factory line. The best that we can do is to be aware, to be vigilant, and to act accordingly. Because it's all too easy to get lost in the daily churn of information being everywhere, and to therefore miss the underlying systems and trends that produce the things that we see, right? You don't want to be Neo at the start of the Matrix. You want to be Neo when he can see the code that's making everything run, right? And that means understanding the systems and the incentives that produce the decisions, the results of which we end up seeing. And if you want a fantastic example of that, I'll whet your appetite with a little bit of a fun fact. Did you know that in real terms, player investment in video games, the amount of money that people are spending on games, is not flat, but it's shockingly close to flat. It's actually one of the things driving the crazy decision making that we see in the industry. And if you want to understand that and a hell of a lot more, check out this video next.
Yeah, good video. It's something that is being harped on even before we've reached this stage, even before 2025. We've been talking about things becoming what they shouldn't, becoming things that you don't want, because this is what happens when anything becomes popular. There's just a lot of bloat, a lot of things added that don't add to the thing. It's just sort of there. Like, you see this with movies. Like, you'll have a trailer to a movie that looks fantastic, but then you see the movie and it has absolute, like, the trailer looks like one thing, but the movie ends up being something completely different. And again, you can get away with pulling the wool over people's eyes the first time, but then you get into the second time, the third time, the fourth time, then the fifth time people start being like, okay, now what the fuck is this? Like, I'm going to assume this is going to be bad and put my money elsewhere. And I say this to a couple people, and they're like, oh, how do you know? It's not out yet. How do you know? It's like, well, human beings have this thing called pattern recognition. The thing that once people have an ideology, they stop doing. It's like, your ideology demands you don't do this because this is bad. But, that thing, and using the power of pattern recognition, I can tell when a game's going to be bad without even playing it. And I can do this easily. Like, it's almost second nature to me. And I think everyone else can do this. And, I'm not perfect. Maybe I'll skip over a game that ends up being good. But at the end of the day, what people want is a situation where, at least 70% of the games coming out are good, and maybe 30 are bad. Right now, we're in this situation where, at least in AAA, where 70% of the games are garbage, and the 20% from some obscure company in Japan ends up being amazing games. And people are just like, what the fuck? The country that used to make damn good entertainment is now ceding that to other countries on the planet. And at the end, I just want a good game, a good product. I mean, I'm not saying other companies shouldn't make good products. I'm just saying, America created this, and America should maintain the standard. And me, as a consumer in America, like, I think that's fine for me to say that, right? It's like, why do you want to destroy a high standard? Like, what is there to gain? I mean, I guess you're sticking it to the chuds. I think, is that the word they use? The chuds. Such a weird fucking word. Whatever. But okay, you're sticking it to the chuds, but you're getting a bad product. Like, you happy? And I guess you don't care for the product. You just care despite this, demographic of people that are entirely in your head. Imagine my unfathomable shock when the AAA studios that grandstand on morality and empathy actually treats people like shit. On fucking God. That's also the thing so many people are figuring out, but I mean, I guess you're just supposed to keep your fucking mouth shut. It's like, the more a company grandstands, I'm a assume the company has skeletons in the closet if it's morally grandstanding, and it's up to you to prove me wrong. And hey, even if I assume when I am wrong, I lose nothing. Like, what do I lose? Absolutely nothing. But if I end up being right and people see that, the company loses. So at the end of the day, as a company, you shut the fuck up and you put out a good product. Yeah, I know that's so difficult to do. I understand. We live in this culture where you gotta moralize every 5 seconds, but at least put out a good fucking product. As a kid, I used to have a dream of working in AAA game industry. I'm glad I abandoned those dreams long ago. Yep, because I mean, it would have bit you in the ass, especially the way many AAA studios and companies are going. That aspiration would have been obliterated. If the CEOs weren't so perversely overpaid, they wouldn't have to do this. Yeah, I see the salaries of many fucking CEOs. I'm like, what the fuck? I mean, again, I'm not against making money and CEOs getting paid their due, but they make that much money, but they fail to sell a product. I mean, money laundering? Yeah. Yeah, I'll say it's money laundering. It's hiring those based on ideology, maybe, or those with connections in the industry over those that are actually. Well, I mean, you can have, like, the thing is, what do a CEO even do? I guess they might do some finances, might choose the direction of the company, but I mean, a lot of CEOs just sit and suck up money. Yeah, it's like, what do you do, homie? AAA games can't collapse faster. Yeah, and again, this is vindication to people who looked at companies morally grandstanding and spitting on you. And at first you're like, what the fuck's going on? But now everyone knows what's happening. Everyone knows what's going on. You can't really hide it anymore. And hey, in cases like these, people are even happy it's happening. Right? We shouldn't be at this case. I didn't want it to get to this point. But we're at this point. Might as well just ride the wave. If a bad company gets its comeuppance and fail, it sucks with people lose their job, but the earnest is on the company not to have that happen. not the consumer. So yeah, it's worth nothing but that outsourcing to. It's worth noting that outsourcing to Indonesia, who are then abused, is a massive issue for tech as a whole. It needs to be addressed as a much wider level than just video games. I mean, yeah, I mean, people understand that, but, and this is going to suck to say, but, I mean, people don't care. You know, I mean, people will moralize, but at the end of the day, all the consumer wants is just a better product. You know, good games. And there is a way to do that to where, again, if you're not an over bloated company, you can end up making, good games. That used to be the case with Blizzard and, all these companies that are now so goddamn big. I mean, they functionally can't fail. Like a lot of them, you know, started out with humble beginnings, but are now at the point where they are because, well, they've lost track of that. The industry really is killing itself. Yes, sir, it is. But anyway, that's all I gotta say about this. Peace.